Hey everyone, it's Sarah and I'm back to film my reading journal for the month of April. April was a slower reading month for me. I just had a lot going on in my personal life and despite reading every day, I didn't read a lot, at one time. And so it took me a while to get through some of my books. I also had some books that I struggled to read as like a physical copy. And so I switched to an audiobook, or I had a book that I had to switch to the audiobook for. And so yeah, it just wasn't my best reading month, but I still read a lot of pages because some of the books I did read were quite lengthy despite only reading 5 books. My average rating was a 4.15 and my favorite book of the month was Empire of Storms. Then in terms of starting and finishing books, again, it was spaced out a lot. There were just books, or other things going on that took up more of my time. But, I still finished 5 books. 3 of the books that I finished, I had started previously in March. So then again, there's just a little less data on this calendar. I mainly focused on audiobooks. I had a couple of books that I read as a physical copy. The quote I pulled for this month was from Empire of Storms: "The world will be saved and remade by the dreamers." I actually did pretty well on my goals. I didn't finish 7 books, and I am still struggling to track my pages in Storygraph, but otherwise I read every day, read over 2,000 pages, and I wrote reviews when I posted my star rating for completing my books on Goodreads, Fable, and Storygraph. I finished everything that I was in the middle of except for Dead Wake. That one I started at the end of April, and so I finished that one in May. I still need to work on my book of the month collection for this year. I think I've only read 1 book of the month so far, and I've gotten a lot more than that in the mail, and so I need to focus on that at some point this year. I finished a bingo, even though I didn't read very much, and then some of my monthly challenges, like the buzzword challenge, I think was the ordinal number. I didn't finish Dead Wake in this month, which would apply for that one because it's Dead Wake, the last sailing of the Lusitania, and so that will carry over into my May bingo. And then my top 3, kind of TBR books to focus on this month. I read 2 out of the 3, Empire of Storms and the Book of Life. I did not start or finish or attempt to start reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, but I am carrying that forward into May because my husband's currently in the middle of reading it and I wanted to try to read it with him. So, and then something else that happened this month was I signed up for an Audible account because I have some audiobooks that I've been wanting to listen to, or some series that I'm in the middle of that the first few books were not Audible exclusive, but then the later books are Audible exclusive. And honestly, I just want to finish the series. And so, I kind of sucked it up and signed up for an Audible account. It'll be good in the long run, but, kind of took me a while to make that decision. In terms of my format tracker, mostly audiobooks. I did have 1 book that I switched from the audiobook to the physical book, and I'll get into that later. And then I have another book that I tried all 3 versions. I had it as a Kindle book for a little bit, and then it got returned to the library, and then I had the physical book on my shelf, and I just was struggling to pick it up and want to read it. And then I ended with the audiobook. That's the one I signed up for Audible for because that ended up, being the best for what I was in the mood for reading this month. Again, my lowest number of books, but also my highest number of pages so far for the year. So despite me being a little bit lower on, or not as, what am I trying to say? Despite me not reaching my 7 book goal, I still read a decent number of pages. Then I added my books to my bookshelf from JoJo's Pretty Paper Shop, and I highlighted that I'm at 28 books so far for the year with my Plan with Elise tracker. Then getting into the individual books, the first thing I read this month was Game Changer. This one is a male-male romance. It's in the Heated Rivalry series, and so this is book 1 in the series. Heated Rivalry is book 2, and so I wanted to start with book 1, even though they're different characters that are followed in the different books, just because I wanted to, I don't know, start from the beginning. I'm a rule follower. So I really did not enjoy the audiobook for this, and I'll get into it in just a minute. But in the book, you have Kip, who's a smoothie shop worker. He has finished his college degree, and he's just trying to figure out kind of where his life goes after that. He's, trying to find, work that applies to his degree, and, is a little bit, I don't know, just trying to, figure things out. He's in transition. Then you have Scott, who's a famous hockey player. He comes into the smoothie shop one morning, orders a smoothie, says hi to Kip, and then he ends up winning his game that night. And he's been in a little bit of a rut. Their team hasn't been doing well. He's been getting a lot of, flack in the media for not winning. And so then he decides, if that smoothie was good luck, or if that helped me win my game in any way, shape, or form, I'm gonna just not risk it. So he keeps going back to get the same smoothie, and his luck continues, and he starts to, kind of form a relationship with Kip. Since Scott is a hockey player, he is closeted. He doesn't want anyone to know that he's gay, just because he thinks it's going to negatively impact his career, and, he wants people to focus on the hockey, and, he'll focus on his personal life at some other point. But they start to, kind of have this secret relationship, and obviously that's going to be where one of the main bits of contention is near the end of the book. But I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a fun time, and, it's a very spicy romance. Again, I didn't like the audiobook. I felt like the audiobook narrator's choice of voice for Kip was just so not sexy. It reminded me of if someone was in witness protection program, and then they were interviewing them for the news, and, they have the voice changer, so they have a lower tone of voice, and they slow down their voice as well, so the cadence isn't their normal. That's what it felt like when Kip was speaking. It just felt just not attractive. I really disliked it. And so the voice that they chose for all of the other characters, the general description narration, not the character's voice, was just fine. So I don't know why the audiobook narrator made that decision, but it makes me hesitate to pick up any of the books as an audiobook, because I just really disliked the narrator's voice for one of the main characters. But all in all, I gave it a 4.25 stars. It was predictable, but it was fun. It was spicy. It was a good time. Next up, I have The Book of Life. This is book 3 in the All Souls trilogy. They ended up adding like 2 more books. There's a book 4 and a 5 now, but this is the original trilogy as written. And I felt like it was a letdown. I can't go too much into the plot of the book just because it's going to spoil things, but I really enjoyed book 1. Book 2 was, good. It kind of took me a little bit to get into it. It was a little slower. And then book 3, I was really disappointed by it. I felt like the plot jumped around a lot, and then I felt like there were things that were left unanswered. There were also, kind of these big situations that they were in that, they seemed impossible, and how are we ever going to get through it? And then like 3 pages later, it was resolved. And so some of that just felt, I don't know, just a little too wild or unbelievable. And then the main plot point that carries you through the whole mystery that goes from book 1 to book 3, I felt like the ending of that was really dissatisfying. They have this book that they think is going to tell them the secret of how witches, demons, and vampires came to be. And there's certain groups that want the information, they want to know what's in the book. There's other groups that are trying to hide what's in the book because they're worried that it's going to affect their species negatively or, whatnot. And so, yeah, when it's finally revealed, like the big mystery, it just felt like a letdown. So I gave it 3 stars. I also could have gone 2. I mean, I probably should have written it 2 at this point. I don't know. I feel like 3 was a little too generous, but I was in a mood for being kind. So anyways, moving on. Then I have The Lincoln Highway. This is a historical fiction. I think it takes place in the 50s. And in it you have Emmett and his brother Billy. Emmett has just been released from a juvenile work program. He was in there for, I think it was like involuntary manslaughter, and their dad just passed away, so they've released him so that he can take care of his younger brother. And his dad was a farmer who wasn't a very good farmer, so they're also finding out that the farm is going to be taken away from them, reclaimed by the bank because his dad had a lot of outstanding bills. And essentially they need to start a new life. They're probably going to move away from the town because of, the person that was killed. Just some animosity towards Emmett and his family. Probably better to just make a whole new fresh start somewhere else. And Billy, his younger brother, finds postcards that his dad had hidden away from their mother, and he notices that the postmarks follow along the Lincoln Highway as she, ran away from them years ago. And he wants to try to track her down. So essentially they're going to follow the Lincoln Highway, try to find their mother, and then start a new life in California. And it was just a fun, road trip. I mean, fun. There were a lot of adventures that took place. Some of them good, some of them bad. And, you meet a lot of different characters along the way. I liked a lot of the characters, even if they made decisions I didn't like or decisions that hurt our main characters. I still felt like they were well written and I could kind of understand where they were coming from for the most part. And I just really enjoyed this one. I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I'd taken the recommendation from a few different people and couldn't remember what the book was actually about. So going into a book, kind of with a fresh, not knowing what's going to be around every corner is a lot of fun. So I gave it 4.5 stars. Really enjoyed it. Then we have Finley Donovan Crosses the Line. This one is the 5th or 6th Finley Donovan book. And again, I can't go too much into the plot just because it would ruin things. They're more interconnected than some other mystery series. And with Finley Donovan, she is this author and, divorced mom with 2 kiddos who just gets put in these really wild situations, these really wild scenarios. And she, in this one, is trying to solve a mystery involving her friend to get her friend, off the hook for something that she's accused of doing. And I will say, the big mystery or the big crime that was committed, it just doesn't quite seem to fit the punishment, in my opinion, or some of the characters' actions regarding this, big crime just don't really seem to make sense to me. So that was something I had a little bit of an issue with. And then too, I feel like some of the characters made some questionable decisions. It's you could do, the reasonable path A, or you could go this wild path B, and they would take the wild path B because obviously it's a more interesting story doing it that way, but also I don't know what person in real life would do all of those things. So, there were times when it just felt a little bit too unbelievable. I still had a good time. I gave it 4 stars. Probably could have gone again, a little lower, but I'm just, I don't know, in a nice kind of nice mood, but I enjoyed it. They're, you know, kind of light-hearted mysteries, and so they're just a good palate cleanser if you want a little mystery, but it's not too stressful. Whoops. Then I have my final book for the month, which is Empire of Storms. This is the, oh gosh, I think it's the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series. Had a little brain malfunction there. And I really enjoyed this one. This is the one that I started as a Kindle book, then it got returned to the library, then I have the physical copy, and I don't know, my reading was just not in the mood for a physical book. So then I ended up purchasing an Audible account so that I could read Empire of Storms. And, you know, that's kind of a bummer when a book is exclusive to Audible, because I really like getting my audiobooks from the library, from Libby. And yeah, I just couldn't do it with this one because of it being an Audible exclusive. So once I actually got the audiobook, this was a great time. I really, you know, devoted a lot of time to it. And, you know, again, can't say too much because it's a series, but everything's really coming together in this book. A lot of plots, a lot of characters that seemed unrelated, or, you know, were kind of doing their own thing over here and they're doing their own thing over there, are coming together in this book. You're left with like a big, you know, what's going to happen next at the end of the book, which I enjoyed. I will say this is the book a lot of people tandem read with book 6. I didn't remember that, or I don't even know how to do a tandem read where you read like a couple chapters here, then you switch back and a couple chapters there, because book 6 takes place at the same time frame as this book, but it is a different character that you're following. And so I, you know, am really excited to see what happens next to these characters, but that doesn't happen until book 7. So, you know, I'm a little impatient to get to book 7, but I still have to get through book 6 next. And again, I'll probably pick up the audiobook version of it, just because with fantasy, sometimes I struggle to get through fantasy books physically, and so it'll be nice to just pick up the audiobook for it. But I gave it 5 stars. It was my favorite. Once I started like really getting into it, there was just a lot that happened in the book. There was a lot going on, and I had a really, you know, fantastic time. So that was everything I read this month. A little bit, you know, shorter than other times, but I hopefully will get back on track with some of my reading in May. Maybe I'll finally read one of my book of the months for the year, but regardless, you know, I'm excited to see what the next month has. I'll see you probably in June to talk about May. Bye.